And we're live. Welcome to this next episode of Candid Conversation. I'm your host, Jason Warren. This is brought to you by Own the Vision Academy and One Institution. We're excited because I think we have an amazing show today, a super amazing show. We're talking about healing the racial divide through conversation. And I think the conversation today is timely. And I got some friends of mine that we work together a lot on healing through conversation. And I'm going to start with introducing, I guess, to my right on the screen. It will be David Daniels. He's a great guy. Worked in government service for a long time. So, David, introduce yourself, and we'll go through and introduce everybody else.
Right. Thanks, Jason. As you said, I spent some time in the public sector, bunch of years, and as a fire chief, an emergency manager, as a safety executive. So my interest really is around safety, and this conversation today is for me a safety conversation because often when people aren't treated properly in the group that they're in, sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes the reason they're not being treated properly is because of how other people feel about how they either represent or how they claim race. So it'll be a very interesting conversation. Yeah.
And now for my other brother from another mother, Greg Suds. We call him Suds. His last name Sudmeyer. But Greg is super talented musician, producer, orchestra conduction, percussionist, all those great things. Greg, take it away.
Sure. Well, thank you for inviting me and us tonight, Jason. And music is what I do. A lot of conducting, a lot of writing and arranging. Spent about 12 years or so at Lucasfilm creating the Skywalker Symphony for George Lucas. Have all that in the background, but mainly related to this subject tonight. My years growing up in Oakland, California, sensitized me. I always tell this, but I remember the day that Martin Luther King was shot. I was in 5th grade. We were all sent home from school because they were afraid of riots. And that's when I was really starting to be sensitized to the importance of intercommunication between our cultures. And ever since, it's been a passion. So moving to Georgia, it's been a wonderful development to really see this take place and have the conversations that really do change lives. So I'm really glad to be part of this tonight and look forward to it.
Greg, thank you. And next we have my big brother, Joey Mitchell. Joey, Suds is a music conductor. I would call you the orchestrator of people. You convene people, entrepreneur, just a great man to be around. Joey, take it away.
Well, hello, everybody. Thank you, Jason, for putting this on. This is called Candid Conversations. That's what I'm looking forward to. People that don't know me, maybe we could get to meet soon, but I really want to save the time so we can have this conversation. Thank you, guys.
Awesome. Thank you. And last but not least, my balding brother, financial guru, and just a person that I would say gets it. He's intently able to listen, and he listens differently. Mark, talk to him about who you are, what you do.
Well, I wish my family members would think that I listen to them as well as you said that. Thank you. I grew up on the north side of town, and grew up in just a white world. Moved down to the south side of town about 2.5 years ago. Met Joey, met Suds, and they've opened up my world to just a brand new place. And we like to stir it up and cause trouble and really make a positive difference where we can. When I say stir up and cause trouble, it's just get people to talk about the issues that they may not be accustomed to speaking about or comfortable speaking about, all in an effort just to make our community a better place.
So it's pretty right. all of us get together and talk about race. And to see black men and white men get there together and talk about race, it's a comforting piece because we kind of try to make the space safe. And I thought, well, why don't we have a conversation so we can help other people make this space safe? And Joey and Greg kind of got together and convened a group of guys to do this. Um, Joey, what made you say, hey, let me talk to this white guy Suds about something that America has had a challenge with talking for centuries?
Well, like I share with people, it was spiritually driven. Um, this conversation around race and the black and the white is really not that clear to me in my spirit. But and I say this often, is that me and Greg were in the same location one time, and I was just being obedient to my spirit, because the spirit that the energy that I felt coming off of Greg was different than most white people that I've experienced, and it was a welcoming spirit. I was obedient, and here we are.
So, Greg, talk to me a little bit about, I know you said you grew up in Oakland, so you were exposed differently. You were exposed to the Black Panther Party, you were exposed to a lot of different things growing up.
Right.
What made it easy for you to talk about uncomfortable conversations or convene people to talk about uncomfortable conversations?
I would say because I've been having those conversations since I was in elementary school. And that's why it's so comfortable for me to address these issues, is because I've lived it with my friends. And, I grew up with great people. It didn't matter what color they were. As a matter of fact, in my background, my parents moved us to Oakland from a white suburbia that was outside of Oakland, and specifically so we would grow up in a multicultural environment. And at the time, which was, I don't know, 1963, something like that, their friends were telling them they were crazy, and they did it anyway. And God bless my parents for having that kind of an insight, because being sensitized to the needs of others and the trials and tribulations of others who had different color skin, but I felt were just as this is same as I was, because we were all in school together. We all had the same lessons together. We all played basketball together. We all ran track together. We all did music together. Uh, it just cut through all the barriers because we just lived together. And that's basically what's happening now, is this great relationship building process through what we're calling the bridge. We're just doing the same thing. We're just talking together, getting to know each other's families, and realizing that we're all the same. All of our struggles are normal, and we can help each other in a variety of ways. And color has nothing to do with it.
So, Mark, when we first met, the first time I sat in Joey's garage and one of the questions I asked one of the guys that were in the circle, why does the word privilege exude so much emotion, right? You said you grew up in the north part of Atlanta. You didn't have the luxury of growing up in a utopian Oakland, right? So there was a different perspective that came from a Georgia boy in the South. What made these conversations easier for you to understand and easier to, I guess, palate?
Well, I've always just been curious about people. I'm an international tax nerd, and so my business is international. I talk to people from different countries every day, and that's the wonderful privilege that I have. And growing up, I've always been interested in just different people and different cultures, and I've always wondered, why can't we do that here back home? They're trying to put it into Atlanta. Hey, I can get on the phone with someone from Germany or France or wherever and have a great conversation, get to know about their family and understand their cultures. why do we have such a big problem here? So I think what made it easy for me was just what Suds and Jody created, and is just an atmosphere where people can be comfortable and naturally curious and ask the questions that maybe we've always wanted to ask, but we're too afraid to ask, knowing that it was a safe space. And that as long as we had good intention in our heart and true curiosity, true wanting to learn, true wanting to make a difference, and not just from a selfish perspective, let me learn, but let me see what can I do to be a better part of the community, that it was just a super comfortable atmosphere.
So David, real quick about what does it mean to you to be in a safe space, to be your full Black self and have these conversations to kind of move the needle?
When you use the qualifier safe, that personalizes it, because safety is about a perception. I mean, people can do whatever they want. They can have whatever kinds of policies and structures and training and equipment and all kinds of other stuff. But until the person themselves feels safe, then it's not. And so for me, I generally feel safe having a conversation about race with anybody who'll have it. And for me, that kind of goes back to the same a similar situation that Suds talked about. I was born and raised in Seattle, Washington, and the Black population in Seattle the year I was born was about 5%, and it never got over 10 the entire time that I lived there. In terms of, at least not, I'm not aware of it. So I had to be able to talk to white people, because if I didn't talk to white people, sometimes I've had nobody to talk to. And so just coming up in that kind of environment, and then having, getting to a place to where I started to meet myself. I met myself at about 27 years old, and became confident enough and understanding of myself and my own needs. But again, I'll have a conversation with anybody who'll have it. The challenge is finding people who will have it with you. And so for me, it is not so much the safety, because if they'll have it, I'm good having it. The challenge is, I found that there's not a whole lot of groups out there that are comfortable having it, and often it's because they don't feel safe. It's not really me. They don't feel comfortable having it, and that's been the benefit of meeting guys like Mark and and Greg and others, that they're comfortable even when it's a little clunky, and that's okay, but they're comfortable at least trying, and let's all, be clunky together, so it's for me, having people who have the willingness to even have the discussion at all.
So,
And Jason, if I could just add in there just a little bit, one of the things I remember if it was one of you guys or some other folks I was talking with, but if you hang out with people who are just like you and hold your same beliefs all the time, what do you really learn? We're just reinforcing our own beliefs, and it's nice to talk about these ideas. And we might not always agree on everything. Look, you put 5 white guys in a room, and you might get 7 opinions on the same issue, right? So, but it's nice just to get these different experiences and different cultural backgrounds and different inputs and experiences to help us just learn and see what else is out there, and how can we really learn from that.
So, for us, I think we've been able to build together, to grow together, to learn together. And for the sake of the audience, these guys, we've been kind of meeting together for the past 2+ years to engage in conversation. But for the rest of the world, it's not like that. Most of the world is segregated. I think Mark and I were talking a while ago, when we were talking about engaging with schools, right? And we talked about how, for the most part, especially in Metro Atlanta, schools are segregated. You go to a Black school or you go to a white school, and you have a sprinkle of someone else. Joey, talk to us about how, as communities, we can start to step outside of ourselves to see the humanity in others and to engage in conversation. Because right now, we have a nation divided. We have a nation divided on politics, on race, on religion. How do we move that needle and spark these conversations?
Somebody has to make the decision to lean in. But basically, somebody have to lean in. It's our society that we live in right now is showing us how divided we are. And they're really, unless someone leans in, then it stays the same way. So for me, I was prepared and willing to lean in. Greg was able to lean in, and then we got other people to lean in. Um, but there's going to be challenges, but we have to be prepared to lean in. I mean, this is the time for me. I'm excited to live in this moment. I'm excited because I'm fortunate enough to actually to get to experience to be able to communicate with another culture other than myself. And what one of the things I share often is my spirit in relation to my experiences. And I noticed, like from sports or whatever, they'd say versus all the time, a lot of times. And I would rather change that word from versus to related, because in versus it causes conflict. And so we're so used to having conflict, nobody wants to lean in because they're anticipating that the other person is going to try to push them back the other way. But if we just kind of go towards related instead of versus, so that's one of the words that I would really like us to try to not use so much far as when we're working together. We have to create a new way to do this, because I'm sure we all clear that there's lots of generations tried to do this before. So I don't know about going back and using their formula, because I don't know if maybe it worked to a degree, but the way I am prepared to do this is so that it work and it's sustainable. So I am very careful with the words. And the other thing is, we have to be careful of our experiences. And then when I say our experiences, I'm talking about the experiences a lot of times from our families, because our family experiences will stop us from creating new experiences, And I look at being in relation with my white brothers and sisters as learning another language. And the only way I'm going to learn that language is I have to go to class and I have to spend time. And so I am committed to logging X number of hours per month with my brothers and sisters so that I can learn.
So it's interesting, right? And this, I'm going to you, Suds. You had the responsibility of bringing white men to quote unquote a black space, right? And Robin DiAngelo in her book White Fragility talks about the defensive mechanism, the defensive behaviors that some white people take when having these uncomfortable conversations. So were some of the things that you had to do to move that needle and to encourage specifically white men? And I say that in critically because white men for so long have never had to tackle or challenge with something that's outside of their norm in American society. So what were some of the things that you had to do to bring one, them into this space, and two, to make it comfortable for them not to be so defensive?
Well, speaking from a production context, as they say in a production, it's all in the casting. And who do you put in the role? And who do you've got to assess people's character first. I just was very judicious and used discernment to see who I would invite to really start this off. Honestly, we're already ready to swim. I wouldn't put anybody in the deep end if they didn't know how to swim first. And so the gentleman that I asked, I already knew from my connection with them that they were really ready. And with those guys, there was no sale at all. It was like, oh my gosh, where's that? When can I go? I was like, I'm ready. I want to jump in and I want to be a part of this. And so in creating this initial push, you have to use discernment on who you believe is ready to be truthful, who's ready to be honest, who's ready to be vulnerable. And you can tell that by, if you've spent time with them, you can tell whether or not they're really ready to do that. So that's a big part, I think, in getting something like this going is casting the right people in the right roles. And,
So,
it's not to say that, I wouldn't invite other people, but, if somebody is truly an avowed racist, it may not be the right time for them to come in to a group like this. However, and we actually really haven't tried this yet, but we haven't actually invited somebody who's really apparently sold on segregation still, and to try to get them into the conversation. There's some people I guess I could invite. I know some.
and
But
I would actually like to hear that. As we kind of transition, David.
Can I jump in?
I'm gonna give it back to you. Give me 1 second. So, David, when we're looking at America as this great social experience, right?
Experiment, actually.
Or experience, all of those things that kind of navigate through.
That's right.
You know, as much as white men have challenges, Black men also have these challenges, um, socially, psychologically, when engaging with white men. So, how would you suggest that Black men engage in conversation? And we're talking about men right now, just because it's 4 men on the show, and me as the host, the fifth. But I think this is for people in general. But there are some nuanced intersectionalities when we talk about women and their engagement, and But for this context, what would you say for Black men when they're going into spaces to say, you know what, it's time to heal, it's time to have conversations?
So I am convinced that the interest, the need, the driver for conversations like this, it really has to come from inside the person themselves.
Right.
It does. So there's a couple of theories, a number of theories of motivation out there. There is a theory out there that suggests that some have what's called an internal locus of control, some have external. The external locus of control is always looking around trying to figure out what everybody else wants and trying to give it to them. And then there's internal locus. And, I want to believe I'm more as a person, more that way, that I have some things inside me that I'm interested in, and it doesn't matter so much what's going on around me. And I believe that those kinds of people are going to it's going to be easier for them to even think about having this dialogue, because I can't walk into a conversation with a white man worrying about what the white man's going to think. I don't really care what the white man thinks. I care what I think about it, and I care that he is willing to have the conversation with me, because I can't change his mind. I can only change my own. I can only change my own view of myself and other people. And again, sometimes I think we put it off on, well, white man don't know but it's not about white people. It's about Black people. Am I interested in having relationships with people other than other Black people? And frankly, I think I might be a bit libertarian in my view on a lot of things. Folks, they don't have to. You really don't. But the challenge is when you don't, you're missing out on a lot of stuff. I haven't met a whole lot of international tax nerds before. Until I met Mark. I didn't even know what that was. I haven't gone to a whole lot of orchestras and stuff. And then I met Greg. The issue is what I've learned from meeting these people who just happen to be white. So, I mean, now, again, I realize, it was easier for me, as I said before, because I was raised by white people. it was around. So if I was going to learn anything, I had to talk to them. So I'm really interested in learning and getting as much out of life as possible. And Black people can't give me everything that I need in life. They just can't and some of it I need to get from white people, some from women, some from gay people, some from disabled people. I just want to learn stuff, and so I think if you're intellectually curious, these conversations are just a part of the process because I want to learn stuff.
So, Joey, you had a follow up to Suds's conversation. I didn't want to not let you respond. So go ahead, Joey. You got to unmute.
Okay. You mentioned about Suds, Greg, having to identify which white guys would be willing to come to our meeting. But I was very aware what he had to do, and that's one of the things I was very conscious of saying. Let me provide the space because I know it's safe. I also had to make sure that the Black men that I invited were solid enough to be able to be there and not be intimidated by white people and be able to hammer the table or whatever they needed to do, but in a way that would be safe. So I had to clearly say to the Black guys is, leave your guns home. And I don't mean physical guns, but just leave your guns home. You're coming to my place. So one of the things that's very important that we talk about all the time is trust. Right. So that's the big piece that those guys trusted Greg. Those guys trusted me. And so there's something in both of us that gave them that feeling to be able to trust us. So I think that's a really, really, really big part of it is the trust. Because listen, and I would say to them, ain't nothing going to happen to you at my home. Clearly.
So Mark, we have a question that came straight from Facebook. What was the most surprising thing that you've learned about the other race since you've been having these discussions?
Man, that's a good one. Give me 1 second to make a quick comment before I try to even answer that question. David said something earlier, and I'm paraphrasing, but he said something like David said something like, I don't care what white people want to hear. I'm here to talk. Something like that. And I love that because I don't want you to temper your words based on what you think I want to hear. I want to hear what's on your mind. The most surprising, this is going to sound stupid, but a lot of this is really self-reflection. I remember my very first bridge meeting, and I'm a bit of a wise ass, and something came up, and I don't remember what the comment was, but I just let loose with something that came to mind, the same thing that I've been saying all my life, the smart ass. And Joey was across from me. And he kind of took in what I said, and then he started laughing. I think you were trying to gauge the humor level. And so what I realized, and I know this is going to sound really ignorant, we are the same. We were at the table and we were hanging out and we were talking, and everyone wants the same things. You want to be able to have a job that you can put food on your table. You want a table underneath a roof that doesn't leak, in a neighborhood that's safe, where your kids can get a good education. We want the same thing. We want the same thing, but there's so many things out there that create an us versus them, whoever the them is, white, black, man, woman, whatever it is. And so the most surprising thing, and again, it's embarrassing to admit, is that we're the freaking same. But growing up on the north side of town, and I can only speak for myself, the way that I looked at the world is I always figured that people were equal, but I knew that people were treated differently. And this is the first time in my life where I feel like I'm able to truly, truly, truly try to make a difference in that area, starting with myself. I never considered myself racist or prejudiced in any way, but I can get better every single day in terms of how I approach the world and how I stand up in situations where maybe beforehand I wouldn't have said something.
So Greg, I want to get back to you and talk a little bit about the word privilege. And, my dog wants to jump into the conversation and have a candid conversation with us as well. However, in this world of COVID, we navigate through. So we talk about the word privilege, right? And you know, for some, that emotes this emotion of I have something more than you, and I had some magic wand. Can you talk about, and I know you've heard it from you know other white men, like I'm not nothing extra special, but as a white man, understanding privilege, the dog still wants to bark. As a white man understanding privilege, what does that mean, and what can you tell other white people when they're thinking about privilege in a negative connotation versus just what the word means?
Well, thanks for letting me unpack this. Frankly, the white culture has to really come to terms, and I think there's a segment of the culture that finally is really come to terms with the fact that this color right here means that we don't have to experience the same things of people of different color, just because of the color of our skin. And case in point, during one of our bridge meetings, the issue of quote unquote the talk came up, and we were discussing what the talk was, and you know how parents had to train their kids. And one of the white gentlemen, who was a very prominent person in the community, and he was in his late 70s, sheepishly kind of raised his hand and said, I'm really sorry, everybody, but I've never heard of that term. And he admitted his white privilege, that he never had to face the issues that are inherent in why the talk is necessary so often with people of color in their own families. Now I know from Joey that there are some who haven't had that experience, but for the most part, I've found more people of color have the talk with their kids about how to behave around police and authority. And most in the white culture have never had to think about how to act around police or around authority because they haven't been targeted the same way. And so it was wonderful, first of all, for our fellow white man in the group to raise his hand sheepishly and admit the fact that he was vulnerable because he didn't understand it. And some of the black guys in the group kind of at first, you could see the frowns on their faces, like, you have to be kidding me. This guy is in his late 70s. He doesn't know what this is. But then there was a decision on behalf of the guys of color in our group that said, you know what, this is a teachable moment. And it was just an incredible outpouring of love for this white man who they could actually help really start to see something in this issue that was a brand new revelation to him, even in his late 70s. And as he has said, including on the Bridge testimony page, it changed his life. And it gave him a sensitivity that he had not had before. And that's where healing takes place. And that's where trust really begins, because the men of color could trust him even more because they all of a sudden realize that here's a white man who really is beginning to even have a glimpse of understanding of our daily experience. And that breaks down a barrier.
It's interesting you said that, right? Because perception becomes reality. And too often we, as the collective, we have these assumptions that you you already have known. However, how could you know? I can't know a woman's experience unless I ask, right? I can assume, but unless I ask, because I'm not a woman, I can't understand the LGBTQ plus community unless I ask. I
Right.
can assume, however, what do they say about assumptions? It makes an ass out of you and me,
Right.
generally just me. Um, so, and I think that's so important. The fact that one, you walk in grace when you're trying to move the needle, because if we continue to assume that they know the experience, we'll never get anywhere.
Right.
Right. So we were on a call yesterday, David and Mark and I. And David, I want you to unpack this statement: taught versus lived experience. All right. Taught versus lived experience. And I say that to the audience to understand. I think most of America specifically focus much more on their taught experience versus their lived experience. What does that mean to you?
So what that means to me, I saw, this has been a few years ago, maybe about 10. I saw a production that was done in California, as a matter of fact, called the California Newsreel, and it was a series called Race: The Power of an Illusion. And I think it's out on YouTube now because it's been around for a number of years. Race is just, it's made up. It's made up. Genetically, Mark and I are probably more similar than Joey and I are genetically. Literally, if you do a DNA test, matter of fact, those tests have been done to find out that it's made up, and it was junk science that a bunch of white guys came up with to justify slavery. To be quite honest, but we all bought it. We bought it. And even though our experience with people might even be different, we continue to buy it. And there are some of us who don't buy it. I don't buy it. I don't buy. I just don't buy it. Some of it is my experience is just different. That there are black people who I love, and there are white people that I love. There are black people that I don't like so much, and there are white people that I don't like so much. And it has little to do with how they look externally, but more to do with how I interact with them. Period. End of story. That's just my opinion. And the other thing is, again, my hard-headedness says, you're not going to tell me what to think. You're not going to tell me what to think. People could say whatever they want about Greg Sudmeyer. I have a relationship with Greg, and you don't have to like him. That's good. I do. So, and you're not going to change my opinion of him because you don't. Same thing with, I have some friends. Matter of fact, I have a handful. Matter of fact, a good number of folks who are gay. I'm not, but they are. And I don't say that to say this good or bad. I say that because I have gay friends, and I stand up for my gay friends. I have women that are my friends. I'm going to stand up for them because I want to. It doesn't matter what you think about them. It goes back to my earlier statement about being more internally driven. That's what gives me joy. That's what makes me happy. So that's why I do it. And again, I realize that in a free country, people have the right to be racist. They do. They have the right to rebel flag. Hold it. They have the right to do it. The challenge is you miss out on nice people like me.
Yeah.
So, but if that's what you want to do, knock yourself out. Have fun with it. You're just not going to get as much out of relationships with other people because you cut off a good percentage of the population. So, and again, lived experience says that if you can be around people who are different from you, you will find that there's things that they can tell you that you didn't know.
Right.
And your life can actually be better, or you can believe the nonsense that we see all the time that says white people are better than black people, and men are better than women, and Christians are better than Muslims, and go on with the long list. If you want to believe that, knock yourself out, but you're missing out.
Right.
So Joey, right? Joey, I will call you also the great teacher, right? And you say you don't live in this society, right? You live outside of the society in how you approach life, right? You're not bought into the system. And I know you teach your children differently, right? And we're talking about this taught versus lived experience. Too often, I think Black people, we teach from the past, not teach how we want to see the future. What would you tell people on how you approach educating your children and the people around you about seeing future forward than living in the past?
Well, that's a great question. And I know you had something else to say, Mark. And thank you, David. Thank you, Greg, and all that. I think people teach from their experiences. And it's not fair to your children to teach from experiences that you may not even know that much about. So I try to prepare my children based on the spirit and energy that I get from them and create a safe space, just like we do for the men, create a safe space for them until they can make their decision on what they want to do. And that's the only thing I'm doing is just hold, as we say, I'm just holding the space. But when I'm holding a space, I'm holding it in neutral. So that because from my experience, this spirit is going, they have their own spirit. They have their own spirit. God has given them all of their talents and gifts that they are to give to the world. They are born with them. The only thing I want to do is hold space so that when the time comes, they're prepared. They're not hindered even from some of the experience that I might have had that wasn't that great. I just want to keep it in neutral and let them do some of the things or do the things that the higher source or whatever their higher source is that they do, you know. Hopefully that's one of the things that I'm attempting not to use the word challenge with is because so many of the things, a lot of times the way I think, the words that's in this society, I don't register with me. And for example, when you talked about white privilege, that doesn't make sense to me. Just the word privilege itself can be tricky, and I won't go into a whole bunch of stuff about that. But every human being has a privilege, and then that skin will do whatever it does. But if someone buys into that, then that's you just get away from it. I don't know how to say it, but it's like once I can identify that they brought into that, okay, good luck. So but because I'm clear in our spirits that we are going to have to figure this thing out and do it right together.
I agree, and I agree, and everyone has privilege. America has created a society where white people have more benefits than others historically.
Right.
We should move that needle, absolutely. But we have to acknowledge that those experiences have been made, right? Vets coming back from Vietnam, Black vets were not able to purchase homes in areas just because we were Black.
Right.
That benefit of being white got you to go into Manhattan in the late 60s, early 70s and buy properties at pennies on the dollar. So you may not like the word privilege, but it's a blessing. It's an opportunity that others didn't have that, created generational wealth.
Mhm.
Till this day, some of the Ivy League schools have the Black kids come early to get the Ivy experience, right? So they have to go 2 weeks early and stay in an all Black dorm because they have to get acclimated. Well, if we're the same, we should be able to be exposed. And I got into this Ivy League, I should be able to go into the program. But to this day, we have that situation. So we can't negate what's going on in society that impacts us differently. There wouldn't be these Justice Department's fines on banks for for charging black and brown folks higher interest rates just because of the color of their skin. Like billions and billions of dollars in fines as early as last year, right? So, that's there. And then there's we can act differently. I'm going to go to you, Mark, real quick. What would you?
Well, well, you get a new question,
Yeah.
or what I was going to say?
Well, I want you to answer what you were going to say earlier, but I want you to answer the question after you say what you're going to say earlier. So my question is, how do we engage differently? How do we make the space in just everyday life, right? How do we make ourselves open, black and white, to say, you know what, let me just have a conversation with you. Let me sit down with you, because we still live in a mostly segregated society. Even in a city like Atlanta, where it's the birthplace of civil rights, it's still very, very segregated. Like, it's like I go and eat lunch with my new uncle, Dr. Richard Cohen, in Serenity, and it's just me, and like I may see a speck of a black person that's walking by, but how do we actually really engage differently?
All right, so let me get to that in just a second. What I was going to say earlier is I think a lot of people have mentioned something that I call ego. And you got to put the ego aside. When the elderly gentleman mentioned, when he asked the question, say, I don't know what the talk is. He had to put his ego aside. And part of that I've put into my daily life in the past 2 years since I've been working on these issues, whether it's career, you're in a meeting or a cocktail hour before COVID or whatever, and someone mentions a phrase and I might not know what it is, but maybe I wouldn't say anything. I'll go home and look it up in the tax code or whatever it is. Now I just ask the guy or the lady right up, excuse me, you use that term, what is it? And all the time, whether it's in a career or career function or a professional function or in my social life, I ask the questions that I used to be afraid of asking for people thinking that I was a dumbass, frankly. And so that's something that I want to share that I personally got out of that. And I'm taking that into my own healing and my own growth in my personal life outside of the racial connections. But Jason, going to your connections, or your question, I think it's a lot of this. I go back and I tell my friends about all that we're doing in the bridge and the personal growth. Even if the only thing I get is selfish, is personal growth out of these discussions, it's worth it. Okay. And I think how we spread the gospel, so to speak, is just to try to get my friends to be open-minded. Just a couple examples. I do this just with politics, when people are willing just to engage in open-mindedness and to do a lot more listening sometimes than talking. My family's very loud, my extended family, we like to say what's on our minds. And we've had a text messaging the past couple days about something going on. And we were all on the same side of the big issue, but there were some battles going on. And my dad, the patriarch, chimed in and he said, hey guys, listen. And it was about shutting people up who we don't like. Okay. And my dad said, look, even the ACLU's out there supporting the KK's right to free speech.
Right.
Okay. And so it goes around to, it's the decency. How do we get people to be decent to each other beyond race? Somebody's a car in front of you slowing down. Well, maybe the first thought shouldn't be honk at the person, hey, dumbass, speed up. Maybe it's, that guy might be lost. Is there something I can do to help that person out? And so to me, it's beyond race. It's how do we be decent to one another?
Right.
And our first step is doing this in the group with race. And I don't know if that really answered a lot, but I know I spoke a lot more than I probably should have.
Hey, Jay,
Greg, go ahead.
One thing that's I really truly feel is a baseline necessity for establishing trust between our cultures is a bare knuckle look at what real history is all about. Not whitewashed history, not rewritten history, but really going back to the roots of the history of this country and before that, but especially for us here in this country, going back to the roots of the history of our country and realize the gross imbalance of privilege between the cultures. And, you know, a lot of people just want to, you know, can't we all get along? You know, God bless Rodney King, but, you know, can't we just, you know, leave the past in the past uh, and not acknowledge those things? Can't we just get along and go forward? Yeah, not really. We have to have a baseline understanding that the people of color can finally trust the Caucasian segment of society, that more people in the Caucasian segment now are going to open their history books and look at the raw truth, at the imbalance that has been far too long in our country. That to me is establishes a trust that can be put. There's weight that can be put on that trust, and I think that's absolutely an essential part of all these conversations.
You know, it's interesting you said that, right? Because if anyone goes to a therapist or a counselor, one of the things that that counselor or therapist says, I can't help you unless you tell me the whole story, right? And you have to be honest with that. And I think part of it where we have this divide in the country, to your point, is we have gone for years and years not telling the true story, right? This was it his story, her story, and the truth. Um, and you know, up until 2015, McGraw-Hill in their textbooks would say that workers came from Africa to work on
Yes.
farms. Right?
Yes.
So in context, workers got paid. In context, they came over, meaning they're willing, right?
Yes.
We just celebrated Columbus Day in America, right? And we talk about Columbus discovering America. And I always say, if I came to your house, kicked in your door, raped your wife, beat your children, did I discover something or was I a monster?
Exactly.
And we have to have. I was watching a documentary the other day on Captain Morgan, and you know, in the history books, he's lauded as this great explorer. And if you talk to the people of Panama, he's considered the devil.
Right.
So it just depends on who's telling the story to us to get to center. And it doesn't make and what I want folks to know, and I think we do a good job of these conversations, is because it happened doesn't make you evil.
No.
All right. It doesn't make you evil. It's just something that happened. Now
Right.
we can move forward. Like a rape victim cannot continue to say, oh, well, he didn't rape, he didn't rape, he didn't rape. Yes, he raped. Your kid may not be a rapist. Your grandkids may not be a rapist, but great grandfather was a rapist, right? So
Right.
we have to acknowledge to move forward. And I think often we have that challenge in our communities because there's no sense of acknowledgement. And if we acknowledge it, I think we can feel that we're at that same playing field. I know David talks about like he doesn't get stuck on history so much. Um, why don't you get stuck on history versus focusing so much on just moving forward?
So the reason I don't is that I can't change any of it. I heard, matter of fact, I heard at a conference in Alaska, of all places. It was a Blacks in Government conference that was in Alaska. And one of the speakers said something that I never forgot. He said that you have a choice with your past. You can use it as a reference or as a residence. And I find that that's the problem. It is not using the past as a reference point. It is the fact that people want to live in it
Right.
and bathe in it and continue to benefit from it. That's really the issue. And I can't change what happened yesterday or 200 or 300 years ago, but you also can't continue to use that as the excuse to continue to behave in a certain way because you always have.
Right.
Or because it's always been that way. We all have you asked a question earlier about what we do about, changing this. It's what do we want to do? It's just being clear, and it's not making it very complex and complicated. It's What kind of world do we want to live in? Do I want to live in a world where when I see Mark walking down the street, I want to be fearful of him? And no, I don't. I do not. Some other people may want that. I don't. I don't want to have to be fearful of him, but generally, difference in our mind starts to mean threat until we have that experience with folks and understand that. And the reality is, I don't know. We are not always the same because of our life experience, but we do have similar interests. We again, as was said earlier, I need to breathe like you do. I need food like you do. I need a safe community to live in just like you do. Now, how we get that might be different, but our ultimate goal is the same. And focusing on yesterday doesn't help any of us get things tomorrow if we're using it as a residence and an anchor to hold us there. So I just don't want to be stuck there. I don't.
David, let me just chime in just for a second on that as well. I was a history major in college, okay, and I love history and I love studying it. And one of the things that I think we can learn from history, but I also want to be careful too, because people are complicated, and we've always been complicated. And some of the going back and reassessing history, I think I've seen things that make me uncomfortable, where they go back and say, oh, well, this explorer, this person, no, he was just pure evil. And I don't think that's right either. So when we do go back and maybe reinterpret history or try to look at a 360-degree history so we can see all of it, I think it's important that we keep objectivity there as well. And I'm not suggesting anyone on this call wasn't that way, but I just want to make sure that we keep that in play as well. So for instance, the Christopher Columbus example, some things happened, right, that people did not like, but no one's all bad. No one's all bad. And I think that whitewashing can sort of go both ways. And I think being as objective, and again, it all comes back to having open minds and respectful dialogue and understanding.
So Mark, what do you say to the person that says, well, we spent centuries telling only one side of the story, all right?
Mm-hmm.
And we've negated this whole truth, right? So he came here and he murdered and raped, right? So, so yes, they both are true. He came here and he told people that didn't know about this world, there's a new world. So he found it for people that never knew.
Right.
And there are people that were living here that said, hey man, you can't just come in here. We live here. This is we can share, but you can't take. All right.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we balance that conversation? Because I think for so many who have been marginalized, our stories get muted because of this is the story that's been told over and over and over again. So they're trying to create some balance in saying, well, this is our experience. While you can say the niceties, let's tell the whole story. So how do we do that based off of?
I think it's objectivity, and you're right. There's already an imbalance, right? I mean, if like suppose you read my bio at the beginning of this podcast. Right. I'm going to sound like the best thing since sliced bread, but people are complicated and no one's perfect, right? So yeah, so let's say that the history of just let's say the mythical character X, okay, or Y or Z is an angel. Well, yeah, how do you tell the full story and get it back on balance and objectivity? I don't know the answer to that, but purely demonizing somebody, an historical figure, I don't think is a way to bring everybody back to the table to have open, caring, honest, trustworthy dialogue. I don't know how we do that with the historical figures, but I think you got. Sorry, David, go ahead.
Well, what I was going to add is so Jason, part of the title is healing the racial divide through conversation. So conversations occur at 3 levels. The first level is information, and all of when we bring a set of facts to the table, it is true to us. It very well may be not true to the other person, but it's true to us, which is why we say it. There are people who do believe that Columbus was a hero. There are other people who feel that he was a crook, and they're both true.
Right.
They are both true. We got to be able to hold both perspectives in our head at the same time. They're information, they're data points, and they are both true. They are also both incorrect, depending on who you're talking to. But the next level is when we get into conversation where there's an emotional connection, right? We start to feel, what the other person is feeling. And that's the conversation we've been having over the last, for me, about a year and a half, is it's getting to how I feel about things. And I walked in the door with enough information about the group. I got invited. I trust the person who invited me. So I came in kind of willing to share a bit. But where we really want to go is level 3, which is a relationship. And in a relationship, I don't need Greg and Mark and Stephen to be different people. I don't need them. I don't want them, don't be black and act black, because they're not. I need them to be themselves and have a relationship with them. And frankly, I'm okay living in my neighborhood where there's predominantly black people. I'm okay with that. But I still can have relationship with people who don't happen to live next door. Because I think sometimes we get hooked, again, we reside in these stories about, segregation is both good and bad. They're both right. It just depends on the conversation we're having at the moment. The question is, can I have a conversation on a relationship level with someone who doesn't live near me, who isn't even in the same community with me, who doesn't look like me? Because that's the secret sauce. That's where the good stuff happens. Is somebody got something I can't offer?
So while I agree, I also understand that we tend in society to pick and choose who we can tell the balance of the hero, right?
No question.
If I were to say the same thing about Hitler, I will be castigated as anti-Semitic, right?
Mhm.
Even though some people believe he was a hero, and the majority of the world doesn't.
Correct. Correct.
And there is never a conversation where we have to balance the history and the truth on that. And too often we have, especially when things related to blackness and related to genocide, specifically in the Americas, not just America, but in the North and South America, right? It's this way or the highway. And when we talk about folks like I ask people all the time, what was so bad about Fidel Castro? And then it's, oh my goodness, why would you say that?
It depends who you ask, right? I
It
lived in
depends
Miami for a couple years.
I'm born and raised in Miami.
And so it was, that topic was off limits.
Right.
Okay. Now maybe a bridge group in Miami to talk about. I guess maybe echoing what David was saying is, I think as long as you have people who are honest and open-minded and willing to trust and share and be vulnerable, I forgot who said that word, I think it's a start on any issue, whatever that issue may be.
And no one group, no one conversation is going to solve all of it. This is not happening.
All right, so Greg, I'm gonna let you go, and then after Greg, I want Joey to start to close us out with, and then I'll go back around to everyone. So Greg, you're gonna make your comment, and then Joey, I want you to give us one thing that we can do as human beings. You always use humans to move just that step closer to healing. So Greg, go first, go with your comment, and then Joey, start to close us out.
Great, thank you, Jason. So this show is called Candid Conversations, and it's healing the racial divide through conversation. And that happens to be a paraphrase of our tagline from The Bridge, which is transcending race in America and healing the cultural divide one conversation at a time. And I'm going to have to go a little bit Bible on you here, if you don't mind. But before I do, here we are on Facebook Live, right? Think about conversations on Facebook, especially in the heated political climate we find ourselves in. There are some people that you have to block, unfortunately, because you just can't get through. And they behave so terribly. So no conversation is really possible with somebody who is that difficult to deal with. Now I'm going to go Bible on you here. A lot of people misunderstand the conflict that is recorded in the New Testament scriptures between the Pharisees and Jesus. It's actually believed by some scholars now that Jesus may have been, we don't know if he was, but may have actually been a Pharisee. And how do we get to that point? It's because they did butt heads. They did have the conversations. And the snippets of those conversations are recorded in the New Testament scriptures. That means that they respected each other. The fact that they could hang in there and have the difficult conversations means that they respected each other. That's why some theologians believe that Jesus may have actually been a Pharisee. Let me translate that into what we do. The bridge provides a safe context with which we can face the hard questions. We don't necessarily always have to be nice about it. We have to be careful. We have to make sure that what we say isn't pointedly a refutation or something that denies somebody their personhood, obviously. But we can ask the tough questions and we can face the tough histories together. And that is what has been healing in our own community. And this is what we want to promote other communities starting to engage in, is having these conversations one at a time where we can respect each other even in the hard issues.
Awesome. Joey, so give us something that communities can start to do right now. We're not going to solve racism overnight, but one thing that we can start to do right now to start to bring us closer together.
I'm going to give it from two different perspectives. I want to give Black perspective and from my white brothers and sisters. To my Black brothers and sisters, I would say have the conversation with yourself. To check with yourself to see if there is anything inside of you that's having you to think that another human being is of more value than yourself. And if that is the case, you do whatever it takes to get that out of you. Now, to my white brothers and sisters, I would ask them that when you are interacting with Black people, ask them how they're doing and mean it. And continue to ask them how they're doing until they start asking you questions or answering you a question. But just continue, because when you first ask, and I'm talking to my white brothers and sisters now, when you first ask how they're doing, they're going to be suspicious. So you just keep doing it. And at some point, then you'll wind up start having some dialogue. If they ain't told you nothing, then check yourself. There's something going on inside of you that you don't have the space there. Because one thing about Black people, they have to feel you. And if they don't feel you, they're not going to say anything. So as my white brothers and sisters, keep asking the questions. Once they can feel you, then they'll start having dialogue with you. And I think once you start having dialogue, and then my Black brothers and sisters, make sure that your value, you got to be clear who you are. And without a shadow of a doubt, know that every human being is the same. I don't care what happened yesterday. So that's what be my thing, is that if you're Black, have a conversation with yourself and make sure you are at the level playing field yourself. And then for my white brothers and sisters, please ask how they're doing and then wait and listen. Thank you, Jason, for putting this on for us. We really appreciate you, brother.
Awesome. Mark, give us a closing tidbit From your
You know,
moving from the north to the south.
following Joey's about next to impossible. Let me just say, thanks for having me. I think the next topic, maybe over a couple of beers, is the historical figures. And what I studied in Spain for a while, and Francisco Franco, the general, the dictator there, did a lot of bad things. But the trains would run on time, and people felt safe walking around their neighborhoods. Again, people are complex, much larger discussion. So we'll have a talk about all the historical figures we want to talk about and solve all the world's problems next time.
Suds, give us something.
Have to unmute there. Something that David Daniels and actually everybody in this conversation has touched on, and that is that there is a richness to life that cannot be experienced or enjoyed with barriers between our cultures. And we have to dismantle anything that prevents us from really, truly first understanding and then truly appreciating on a loving friendship level people of any other culture. And so, we're committed to promoting that idea that it's possible. And the results are incredibly satisfying on a soul level.
David, close us out.
So I shared a little bit earlier that there are these three levels of conversation. There are also four types of conversation. And one of those kinds of conversations is a diatribe where it's a one-way conversation where I'm basically just trying to spew what I believe and trying to get everybody to agree with me. Another is a discourse where at the very least, I'm trying to get you to understand something or pass along some information, but I'm halfway interested and you participate. Then there's also a debate but again, in a debate, we're actually kind of in conflict because we're both trying to make our point. And then there's what we've been having, which is a dialogue, because dialogues are cooperative. And you cannot dialogue with yourself and be considered normal. So there has to be some other party involved in the dialogue, but it's a cooperation where we're both trying to get something out of the exchange of information between the two of us. That's the key. If we could stop some of the debates, stop some of the diatribes, people, the talking heads yelling at people, and have conversation with each other, that's a space where we all get the opportunity to really be better, and we can both be better. I say this and I'll end. There's another one of those theories out there. There's a social exchange theory of relationships that says when we both come to the relationship, if we both don't contribute to it, we're both not going to stay in it. Right. And that's the other thing I'd add to what Joey said about our Black and white brothers is that if you don't put something in and the other person doesn't also put something in, you can't ever get to that relationship. We both have to put in what we bring. And sometimes it's going to be ugly. At least you might describe it that way. Or it might be painful. I might describe it that way. But if we stay in there, if we're really interested in building toward a relationship, we'll stay in there, we'll keep contributing, and the world will be a better place.
Right.
Well, brothers, I thank you for taking the time to be on this episode of Candid Conversations. We try to provide not only tough conversations, but solutions to help our community. This has been great. I love talking with you all. I love, being in relation with you all. One of the things I would just like to leave our audience with before we sign off is ask yourself, are you living based off of taught experiences, what someone told you about life? Are you really living based off of your lived experience, right? And it's good to know, like we always said, the past, but engage deeply on your lived experience. Engage on how you can navigate the world, not what someone told you, but your experiences. And I guarantee we can move the needle just this much. We're not going to change the history of America overnight, But what we can do is do our part to change our small communities that will expand, kind of like that ripple in the lake, right? We're gonna do it step by step. This has been Candid Conversations, brought to you by Own the Vision Academy and One Institution. We appreciate you. Until next time, good night.